Y'all, welcome and welcome back to my channel. My name is Taya and this is Taya's Turning Pages. So by the title of today's video, you can tell that this is going to be my main wrap up. And guys, Floppiana. I'm in my Floppiana era, okay? I am in my flop era because I only read 4 books this month. 4. And you guys know I usually read or try to read more than that, like double, triple that. But with moving and everything like that, it just fell completely through. And I'm surprised I even got through 4 books, so that should, you know, deserve a round of applause. But at the same time, I am like really disappointed that I didn't get through more because there were just so many good books on my TBR for the month of May, and now they're just going to be sitting on my TBR cart again as TBR vets. But it's fine, you can't win them all, you can't get through them all. So yeah, and the 4 books that I read, I actually loved all of them. I have given every single one of these books either a 4 or a 4.5 star rating, and that's an amazing thing to have because I could have honestly had a shitty reading month in terms of just like the number of books that I got to, but also just like the quality itself, you know? So the fact that all of these were bangers for me, that's a win, and I need to celebrate that. So before we dive into the actual review portion, I did want to say that I'm probably not going to do the typical like rating system that I normally do for my wrap-ups, where I talk about my least favorite books and then work my way up to my favorites, because all of these books, like I said, were rated either 4 or 4.5 stars. So I am just gonna like pick them up and just talk about them and just go from there. With all of that out of the way, let's get started. So the first book that I wanted to talk about is The Island by Adrian McKenty. So this was actually an ARC sent to me by Little Brown and Company, so thank you so much to Little Brown and Company for sending this my way. I'm one of the few people that enjoy the chain written by Adrian McKenty, so I was really excited when I found out that he was coming out with another book and that it was going to be a, you know, horrific and like thrilling ride just like the chain was. Oh, and I also meant to say that even though I was sent this as an ARC, this book is available to all. So I think the pub date for this was May 18th. So if you do want to pick this book up, you definitely can. This story actually follows a family who decides to go vacation in Australia. And once they get to Australia, they do all of the touristy attractions, but they start to quickly realize that they really want to go off the beaten path and do more of the local attractions essentially. And so they actually strike up a conversation with these 2 men who have direct ties to this remote island that will allow this family to go off the beaten path and kind of explore wildlife and see koalas, kangaroos, etc. And one of the men actually warns the family to not even like waste their time and come with them to this remote island because it's just not a good place for tourists to be, especially American tourists, because that's like a huge thing that keeps getting brought up in the book. But this man keeps telling them that it's not a good idea for them to come to this island. But his partner actually has an ulterior motive, and he tells the family that they can come to this island as long as they pay them a certain amount. And so the family does decide to pay this amount, and once they get to the island, they start to explore. They start to really, you know, just take a look around the island and see what this island has to offer. But unfortunately, something tragic happens that involves the family, and now this family cannot leave the island. They are being forced to stay here against their will because of what they were involved in. And so now you follow them on this journey of just trying to survive this ordeal in this island, but to also outsmart the people that are holding them against their will from returning back to the mainland. And the story takes a sinister turn from there. I don't want to say too much else because this is one of those thrillers that you just need to go into not knowing too much and just be there for the ride because it is wild. So I did rate this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I thought this was phenomenal. This has easily become one of my favorite thrillers / horror books of 2022, period. I can confidently say that I am a fan of Adrian McKenty's books, and I'm looking forward to his next one, okay? This story had my heart pumping, it had me biting my nails, and it had me literally on the edge of my seat because I was so curious to see how this family was going to survive the horrific acts and things that were being thrown their way. It's really sick and twisted how the locals on this island would go to extreme lengths to terrorize the outsiders that, you know, step foot onto the island. And then moving on to the plot itself, I thought it was brilliant and I thought it was fun. It's definitely outlandish and absurd, similar to The Chain, so definitely make sure you suspend any and all disbelief before you go into this book. There are a lot of things that happen in the story that you just know would never, of course, play out in real life, but that's what made the story more fun for me and more enjoyable for me to read. But overall, I really loved the plot. I thought, again, it was really fast-paced, it was gripping, it had my anxiety like through the roof, and it just had me on the edge of my seat and like wanting to know what was going to happen next. So I was constantly turning the pages and I couldn't put this book down. So I don't really want to get into the nitty-gritty of my review because, like I said, it's a thriller. I don't want to spoil it too much, but as I mentioned, the story does follow a family. So you follow a stepmother, her husband, and then the husband's 2 kids, a son and a daughter, and then you also follow a couple that gets thrown into the mix, but you're really more so focusing on the family. So in terms of the characters that I really enjoyed reading about, Heather, who is the stepmother, I loved her. Okay, she was a badass through and through. She did everything she could to try to outsmart the locals on this island and to beat them at their own game, but also she was so determined and just so strong-willed and did everything that she could to not only save herself but also save the people around her, specifically the kids. It was just so empowering. I can never say that word. When she was able to just put herself 5 steps ahead of the locals, you know, like it was just phenomenal. But I will say that her character was really jarring because in the beginning she came off as very impulsive, very timid, and very ditzy, but then towards the middle and the end of the story she turned into Katniss Everdeen in the blink of an eye. I was like, where did these survival skills come from, girl? But I don't know how Adrian McKinty was originally trying to craft her character. I'm not really sure what happened there, but either way I still enjoyed reading about Heather, and I was rooting for her every single step of the way. In terms of the other character that I really enjoyed reading about, Petra, she was actually the girlfriend in the couple that I mentioned, so I loved her character. Like, I really loved the women in the story. I would just say that, like, Adrian McKinty actually, like, I feel like did a pretty good job at like writing the women characters, which usually can make me nervous when men authors will write women characters, but I think he did a pretty good job, and I think that he did a good job in The Chain too. So, you know, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. But I really liked Petra's character overall, and I just thought that she was such a good voice of reason as well as just a wiseful person, and I just really enjoyed reading about her and her background. I just loved her and Heather's dynamic. One thing about me is that I love a good female friendship and like positive, like healthy female like relationship in a book, and that's exactly what I got with Heather and Petra. All that to say, Team Petra, Team Heather, we stand. The reason why I didn't give it a full 5 stars is just because it was too gory for me. If you watch my videos consistently, then you guys know that I am not into gore. I have said that multiple times. That's why I really only dip and dabble my toe into the horror genre every now and then, because I don't like gore. I don't like reading about blood. I don't like reading about people getting slashed, you know, guts spilling out. I do not like that. That really makes me uncomfortable, and it makes me sick to my stomach. I am very sensitive towards that type of stuff, so I typically stay away from like most horror books because of the gore aspect. And I didn't really know how far Adrian McKinty was going to go in this story, because in The Chain I felt like there were some gory scenes, but it wasn't, I feel like, as bad and as graphic as this book. So there are definitely some scenes in here that will make your stomach churn and make you kind of go like, oh, that was gross. I'm not going to get into the full description, but I will just say that there is a scene that involves fire ants, and it has been burned into my psyche ever since I read it, and I really hate that for me because it was disgusting and it was just so graphic. The way that Adrian McKinty described it literally had me kind of going like this and like scratching myself because it was just so like real and vivid and raw. And anytime an author can do that, that's phenomenal, because that's not an easy feat. I feel like it is really hard to do more showing than it is telling, but I felt like Adrian McKinty executed the gory scenes very well. And the other reason, which is like more personal, and this is just more like of a me thing, why I couldn't rate it a full 5 out of 5 stars is because even though I think Adrian McKinty does a good job at writing female characters, there was a lot of chapters and a lot of dialogue where a lot of the male characters were threatening specific violence against the women on the island, and it just did not sit right with me. I said that's more of a me thing. That's more of a me thing, more of a personal problem. I just don't really like to read books that harp on violence against women, especially like in my thriller and horror books. That's not my vibe. So I didn't realize that that was going to be a big plot point in here, and it was. And it rubbed me the wrong way, of course. That's why I just couldn't rate it a full 5 out of 5 stars. Other than that, I thought the book was brilliantly done. I think it's a perfect summertime beach read or like vacation read. And the last book that I don't have a physical copy of, but that I did read during the month of June, is Fake It Till You Bake It by Jamie Wesley. So this was another arc that was sent to me over by the publisher. So thank you so much, St. Martin's Press, for sending this my way. I really appreciate you guys over there. So this book actually doesn't come out until June 21st. So I am just going to read the synopsis here to make it easier. Jada Townsend Matthews is the most reviled woman in America after turning down a proposal on a reality dating show. When she comes home to lick her wounds, Jada finds herself working at San Diego's newest cupcake bakery, Sugar Blitz, alongside the uptight owner and professional football player Donovan Dell. When a reporter mistakenly believes Jada and Donovan are an item, they realize they can use the misunderstanding to their advantage to help the struggling bakery and rehabilitate Jada's image. Faking a relationship should be simple, but sometimes love is the most unexpected ingredient. So this book, as you can tell by the synopsis, is a standard / stereotypical rom-com. I did rate this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. stars. I just thought this book was so sweet, so cute, and honestly a breath of fresh air. This book honestly reminds me of It Happened One Summer, but make it black. You guys already know that I love It Happened One Summer. It's one of my favorite romance novels of all time. And so whenever I can find a book that has a similar vibe to it, I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to read it. And the fact that this book has black characters at the forefront just made my heart swell with joy and pride and love, and I just appreciate Jamie Wesley for doing that for me. So while I did enjoy this book overall, like I said, I thought it was really sweet, I thought it was really cute, and it just gave me all of the feels that you typically get with a rom-com. I do feel as though Jada and Donovan are pretty one-dimensional and at times two-dimensional, which is really unfortunate because I would have liked for us to be able to learn more about Donovan and Jada individually. I felt like the only time we really got to know them, really knows what makes them tick and knows what makes them, you know, happy, sad, etc., is when they were thrown together. I would have just really liked it if the reader could have spent more time with both of them separately. So maybe if they would have had alternating chapters, I think that could have helped, because I just didn't feel as super connected to Jada and Donovan the way that I normally do with other characters in romance books. And there was a lot that Jamie Wesley, I feel like, set up for both Donovan and Jada. Both of them have complicated family dynamics, but they also both have complexities within their own self. I wish we could have just, again, explored a bit more, maybe with alternating chapters. And maybe that's, again, a me problem, because I did just say that to me this read more of like a rom-com, not like a women's literary fiction book like Beach Read or, you know, People We Meet on Vacation or something like that. Maybe I just have my contemporary romance hat on versus my like rom-com romance hat on, but I still feel like we could have got more oomph and more substance with Jada and Donovan's characters individually. That's all I'm saying. But overall, I still enjoyed the story for what it was, and I definitely will be picking up more by Jamie Wesley in the future because this is actually becoming a series and I'm so excited. I didn't realize it until I read the last chapter, because the way it ended, I was like, yay, we're gonna get a second book, and it's going to focus on one of my other favorite characters that appears in the story. So Donovan actually has two best friends. I forget their names already, but he does have two best friends that help him run the bakery, and I think they're both going to get their own separate stories, and I'm here for it because I love both of their characters. I just think it's going to be fun reading from their point of view. So definitely can't wait for the second and hopefully third book that comes out in the series. But again, overall, really enjoyed this, thought it was really cute, and any story that can give me It Happened One Summer vibes and feels, I'm always gonna go up for, period. Now moving on to the physical books. So the first book that I have here is Black Girls Must Be Magic by Jane Allen. So this is the second book in the Black Girls Must Die Exhausted trilogy. I'm not going to get into the synopsis of this book because this will spoil pretty much everything that took place in the first book. So definitely make sure you check out that if you do want to know what like this book is all about. But I will just say that I did rate this a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I enjoyed this story a little bit more than I enjoyed Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, which is really surprising. I wasn't sure what to expect going into this one, but I'm really glad that I read this book as well as Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. I think are considered like slice of life stories, and this book is exactly what it gave when it comes to slice of life. I just really enjoy reading about Tabby and reading from Tabby's point of view, and I think the reason why I enjoy this book a little bit more than the first one is because the first book, of course, is setting up the characters, setting up their background, and kind of gearing you up for what ride you're about to be taken on when it comes to those characters and their storylines. Whereas this book, you're already familiar with the characters, you're already settled and grounded in their storylines, and you know them. And in the first book, I didn't really care for Tabby's character all that much. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really care for her character, and I didn't agree with a lot of the things that she said and a lot of the things that she did. But I had to remember that one, this is a story, and then two, like I mentioned before, Black people are not a monolith, and this book to me showcases that very well, not just with Tabby's character, but also with her friends Layla as well as Alexis, and just other characters that pop up throughout the story. Really, it does boil down to who am I to judge? So yeah, once I realized that and I just kind of like kept that in my mind, I just felt like it made for a more enjoyable reading experience, and I really do enjoy Tabby's character now. Like I said, I really like reading from her point of view, and I really like learning about how she's going to tackle the issues that many Black women have to face on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of discussions in here that talk about microaggressions in the workplace, that talk about being the only Black person in the workplace and having to deal with, again, microaggressions, racism, as well as just not feeling like you belong, not feeling like you're accepted for who you are, and not feeling like you can show up to work your full authentic self. There's discussions in here about hair and what hair is deemed professional and what hair is not deemed professional. There's talks about the Crown Act. There's also talks about Black women and the mortality rate when it comes to, you know, giving birth and labor and all of that type of stuff. Medical racism. There's just so many important discussions that Jane Allen presents in this book, and for that I stand and I appreciate, and I feel like she makes these topics really digestible for non-Black people. So I definitely recommend checking out this trilogy. The third book isn't out yet, but I do recommend picking up the first book, Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, and then quickly following it up with Black Girls Must Be Magic, because these are just really good stories and they're really important. And I mentioned this in my main TBR video, but I don't really feel like there's that many literary like fiction stories that have a black character, especially a black woman character, at the forefront throughout the series. The story focuses on just everything, so you do celebrate the highs with her, but you're also there with her during the low points of her life. So I just can't say enough great things about this series. It's a perfect no, but I really do enjoy my time reading it, and I cannot wait to read the final installment of this book, because the way that the story ends was really heartwarming, and it definitely changed my opinion and view on some of the characters in here, specifically Mark. You guys know that I can't stand Mark, who is Tabby's like love interest throughout the series. I can't stand Mark, but this book has made me look at him in a different light, and I'm kind of like, okay, I don't hate you, but I'm still side-eyeing you a little bit, you know. It's one of those things. So maybe with the last book I'll actually come around to liking him more, but he's not as bad as he was to me in the first book. So yeah, overall definitely recommend picking up this trilogy. And the last book that I have here is a thriller, and it is An Honest Lie by Taryn Fisher. And so this story actually follows a young woman named Lorraine, aka Rainey. Rainey actually grew up in this very toxic and tumultuous and volatile environment as a child, and because of that she of course carries all of those experiences with her, and it shapes her into the character that we come to know. So she's very standoffish, she doesn't really trust people, and she keeps to herself for good reason, because like I said, what she went through during her childhood was horrific. But she does end up getting into this relationship with this man, and he eventually becomes her fiance, I'm pretty sure. And so him and Rainey decide to like move to his hometown, because Rainey was living in New York at the time. Her fiance actually has like a big group of friends that he's really close with, and those friends of his do have wives, and he wants Rainey to become friends with those wives. So you know, they have that like, you know, mutual friendship thing going on, and Rainey's not really happy about it. She doesn't want to be friends with these women, but she decides to go along with it anyway. And so once Rainey starts to get acclimated with these women and starts to, you know, hang out with them more, they decide to all go on this girls trip to Vegas, much to Rainey's dismay, because Rainey has a lot of negative connotations with Vegas where she grew up, and so she's not really happy about going, but again she decides to go against her better judgment. Once they get there, something bad really happens to one of Rainey's friends, and one of Rainey's friends does end up getting kidnapped. And once Rainey finds out that her friend was kidnapped, the kidnappers tell Rainey that they actually wanted to take Rainey, not her friend. So in order for Rainey to save her friend, Rainey has to confront her past and confront these people head on, and the story takes off from there. So that's pretty much like the general synopsis, I feel like, of the book. I don't want to get into anything else, especially what Rainey went through during her childhood, because I do feel like it is an integral part of the story, and you'll find out anyway once you start reading. But I will just quickly mention, like, there is a spoiler on the back of the book here, so in the synopsis, and Kayla did mention this in one of her reading vlogs, and so I recommend not reading the synopsis on the back of the book. Maybe just read the quick blurb on Goodreads if you are really interested in learning more about it. You can also check out my Bookstagram post, because I did edit the synopsis so that way I didn't reveal who the kidnappee was. So if you are interested in like actually reading the entire synopsis, definitely make sure you check out my Bookstagram post. This was one of the books that I mentioned in my Made TBR video that I said made me nervous, because it was getting so many mixed reviews on Goodreads, on Bookstagram, just everywhere. It just seemed like so many people that have read this book have said that they did not like it, and that they don't know if they're going to continue reading more by Taryn Fisher. And that kind of had me shook a little bit, because I was like, wait a minute, y'all telling me this after I just bought it? What's going on? What's tea? What's tea? So I was nervous when I finally got this in the mail, but as I started to read it, I was like, I don't see what you guys are seeing. And then once I got to the end, I was like, okay, so either I just like trash books, or this is just another case of me being in the minority of just liking a book that most people don't like. I rated this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars because I genuinely loved and enjoyed the story. I thought it was so good. It was so gripping. It was so interesting. And I just loved the way that the story came together in the end. I know that so many people are rating this book on Goodreads like 3, 2, and 1 stars. And I'm just honestly appalled and just like shocked, because I don't know what I read and what those people read, like where the disconnect is, but I thought this story was pretty good and well done in my opinion. This is the first book that I've read by Taryn Fisher, and I am really impressed, and I definitely will be picking up more of her books in the future, because this was good. Like, I don't really know where the disconnect is, like I said, but one of the reasons why I really love this book was the dual timeline. You follow Rainey in the past, but you also follow her in the present. And I will say that even though this is one of the reasons why I rated it high, it's also one of the reasons why I rated it low, because I was more so interested in Rainey's past than I was in the present. Whenever we dig back to the chapters during her childhood, I was more so interested in that and like turning the pages and really trying to figure out what was going to happen next during Rainey's childhood. And I felt like the past was more fleshed out, and I just felt like there was just more at stake for Rainey back then than there was in the present, if that makes sense. But overall, I still enjoyed the dual timelines. The final sentence of this book, chef's kiss. It made me tear up because it was just the perfect ending and like the cherry on top to a great revenge tale. That is what this story is. It is like truly about revenge, but it is also a story about avenging the people that you loved and also possibly lost. And I just thought it was brilliantly done. I am a sucker for revenge tales. I don't know what it is. Maybe that's my morally gray complex coming into play here. I don't know. But I love revenge stories. And to me, this one was a perfect one. I felt like the present day timeline was just dragging a little bit too much. This book to me is pretty slow burn. You don't really get a lot of action until you get towards the end. Now there is some action and suspense in the past timeline, but again, like in terms of the actual like thrilling parts of it, really don't get that towards the end of the book. And in terms of Rainie's character, I loved her. I'm sorry, I genuinely loved Rainie. I was invested in her. I felt very connected to her, and I was so concerned about her well-being and how she was going to deal with and unpack all of the trauma that she has experienced from her childhood, but also experiencing in her adulthood. I was just praying for my girl's mental health throughout the whole story. Like, that's really what it boiled down to. I was like, Lord, she's gonna need a lot of therapy. She is going to need a lot of therapy. Then I think in the book she actually did mention getting therapy, but I was like, no, she's going to need more because she just has so much trauma that she just has to unpack and really like try to figure out how she's going to heal properly. But besides that, like, I was just genuinely invested in Rainie's well-being and just trying to see how she was going to enact her revenge on the people that wronged her and wronged her loved ones. And my girl delivered. And the other thing that I enjoyed about this book was like that friendship dynamic in here. Definitely gives like Real Housewives. The way that these women interact with one another, the way that they are really shady and catty and bitchy towards one another is definitely giving Real Housewives, and I am obsessed with that franchise. So like, I was eating it up. But I could definitely see how that could bother people and why some people probably rated this low, because their like group dynamic is kind of integral to the present day timeline, and it's a big focus, I would say, of the present day timeline. If you're not into the extra drama and stuff, definitely keep that in mind, but I was here for it and I was eating it up. I thought that they were all so entertaining, and just reading more about them and how they would, again, shade each other, it was just funny to me. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this book, and I definitely am in the minority, but that's okay. I usually am with a lot of thriller books, but I definitely will be picking up The Wives as well as The Wrong Family by Taryn Fisher to see if I'm going to enjoy those two books. And if I do, maybe she'll become my favorite thriller author of mine. I'm not sure, but this one did not disappoint. All right, y'all, and those were all 4 books that I read for May. So I'm hoping with June I can definitely read more than this and get back on track. But like I said, all of these books that I read for the month of May were bangers, all hits, no misses, and that is good enough for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me my channel out. And lastly, please make sure you follow me on Bookstagram as well as Storygraph. I will leave all of that information linked down below, as well as at the end of the video like I always do. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!